Describe in single words only the good things that come into your mind. About your mother?
My mother?
Yeah.
Let me tell you about my mother.
What is real? How do you define real? If you're talking about what you can feel, what you can smell, what you can taste and see, then real is simply electrical signals interpreted by your brain.
Have you ever been in an institution? Cells.
Cells.
Do they keep you in a cell? Cells.
Cells.
When you're not performing your duties, do they keep you in a little box? Cells.
This causes it. This causes it. This causes it. Information overload. All the electronics around you poisoning the airwaves.
You are listening to the High Tech Low Life podcast, a Cyberpunk media retrospective. High Tech Low Life contains themes and language not suitable for all audiences. Listener discretion is advised.
Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the High Tech Low Life podcast with your hosts, Eric and Josh. I'm Eric.
I'm Josh.
This is episode 2, a continuation of, actually, it's part 2 and episode 2, a continuation of part 1, episode 1, our look back at Neuromancer by the great William Gibson.
Ooh, well, yeah, that's exactly what we're doing.
I'm so pumped, actually. So last week went, how do you think it went?
I think it went okay. I mean, for a first recording, there were a few speed bumps. I don't know,
I'm curious, like, I don't know that what we did last week was what we'd set out to do, and we haven't released it yet. Our actual release date is in a couple days. I'm curious the reception of it, because I thought it was interesting. I don't know. I guess we'll see. We're probably not going to do every episode like that, almost certainly.
Yeah, it had some, I don't know, minor issues, in part because it's the first episode, so we're probably explaining things that in the future won't need to be explained.
Mm-hmm. True.
And I don't know, it's okay. Structuring this show, or at least structuring sort of two-parters,
You're right,
on this show. Okay, we need to figure out a way to go through the plot of something, because clearly not everybody is going to read along with us.
Mm-hmm. Although we should probably.
Yeah, probably.
I mean, if you're into this type of stuff, one would. Well, I guess you can't have possibly watched all of it, or listened to all of it, or read all of it.
I mean, you could have, but boy,
I mean,
you
did,
been
but
busy.
You're fucking.
Yeah,
weird.
I'm a fucking lunatic. I don't take me as an example.
You're inhuman.
Yeah, I'm not a positive example as far as that goes.
Well, I guess I did want to say that we spent pretty much the entire episode going over beat by beat in the book, and obviously maybe we will do that for all our book episodes. That's another problem with this podcast. We are going to be using multiple forms of media, so it's like the plot breakdown of a 90-minute movie is not going to take nearly as long. So it's just, I don't know. I guess we're just flying by the seat of our pants and seeing how it goes.
Yeah, okay, so the way we did it, the last episode, okay, we talked about the characters and then walk through the plot.
Mm-hmm. Well, we kind of hit characters as we were going through plot.
Yeah. And I think if we do it like that, where we go through the whole plot of the book, that's gonna be inherently a bigger and longer episode than, okay, talking about, this week, where we'll talk about themes, questions we had come up, kind of whatever.
Mm-hmm.
So, again, this brings me to something that we talked about before we started the show. Should we artificially, maybe go through the first half of the book and characters in the first episode of a two-part thing?
We could. I mean, that's the only other way to do it. I don't know if that's the answer or not. I guess we'll find out at the end of today's show once we go through the other stuff we wanted to talk about Neuromancer apart from the plot, because books are long.
Yeah, and this book is fairly dense and pretty plotty. So
is every book recap going to be a two-parter? Maybe we don't need to go as in depth as we did. I don't know. I hope people who are listening are along for the ride of this podcast's growth and development as it kind of goes.
Yeah, we're figuring it out as we roll.
Because there are certain things that we know we want to hit about everything we cover, but being as they're different forms of media, we're not exactly sure how we're going to cover them differently, and the only way to do it is to do it. So we started with a hard one, but also where else are you going to start when you're talking about Cyberpunk than Neuromancer?
Yeah, I don't know if there was another option, really.
Yeah. So before we hop into the second part, I did want to ask you one question about this podcast.
Okay.
It's just to, get us warmed up and talking, besides what we've just been doing for the last 7 minutes. Is there a property, a Cyberpunk property, that you can think of that you're looking forward to most covering as we do this? And don't say Neuromancer.
That's tough. I've got a couple of answers.
Well, I asked for one, so you failed this test.
Well, fuck you. It's my podcast too.
It's my question. Are you a big when you're playing Would You Rather? Are you a big both or neither guy?
Bread for feet.
All right. Good answer.
Okay, so one major property that I haven't read for, I don't know when it came out, probably 25 years ago now, maybe closer to 30, is the Neil Stephenson book Snow Crash.
Yeah.
Because I did not like it when I read it, and I haven't gone back and read it. I thought it was trying to be a little too clever for its own good, but I don't know. It's like I like a bunch of other stuff that Neil Stephenson has written, and maybe I'll be less, I don't know, cynical about it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, like, and we aren't going to go into the plot or anything of Snow Crash, but I just remember reading it being like, okay, I get what you're doing, man. Okay.
I wasn't hip to the culture back then. Was like Snow Crash and Neuromancer like a Star Wars, Star Trek type situation?
No. It's...
Because I've heard it compared to, I've not read Snow Crash, sorry.
Yeah.
But in my readings of Neuromancer, Snow Crash comes up constantly as being compared to it.
Yeah, it's kind of the other major novel. I mean, that...
Right. Yeah, I know.
Yeah, that anybody who has, anybody who's familiar with Cyberpunk and reads books has read both Neuromancer and Snow Crash. There's a bunch of, other shit that most people have read or some people have read, but those are the two that pretty much everybody is guaranteed. So I think that's kind of why they're compared. Snow Crash is weird in that, in my mind, it's kind of the end of Cyberpunk as a literary movement to some extent, because it's sort of like Blazing Saddles was the end of the Western.
Okay.
I mean, because it's really kind of a parody. I mean, it functions as the same thing, just sort of like Young Frankenstein functions as a Universal monster movie.
Sure.
But...
Do you have any comparison that isn't Mel Brooks?
No. I compare literally everything to Mel Brooks.
It's true. I know that about you. That wedding was beautiful. It was it was like I can't think of another.
It was like the
It's
beginning of
Spaceballs.
History of the World Part 1.
Yeah.
It was exactly like the yogurt scene.
Oh, exactly. Well, I'm excited to get to that one as well because I've never read it and only heard things. I heard that the metaverse is based off of it, so that should be fun to compare when we get there. If the metaverse still exists.
Yeah. Well, that's the other thing that Snow Crash has going for it. Stevenson really did a good job of iterating out of the first generation of Cyberpunk books into stuff that would eventually become marketable.
Sure.
The other one I'm interested in is, or at least the other one I can think of off the top of my head, is the final book in Gibson's Bridge trilogy, All Tomorrow's Parties.
Okay.
Which is, I think, maybe his shortest book. It's also, I don't know, it's, and it might be partially because when I read it the first time, kind of the effect it had on me, it really feels like the last novel of the 20th century.
Oh, wow.
And like, okay, party's over. We're, turn the lights off, get out.
Yeah. Well, that should be depressing.
It's not, the thing is, it's not depressing. It's just, you can really, I don't know, it feels like the oncoming millennium.
I mean, the 20th century wasn't great, so maybe it is for the best.
Yeah, so I'll be interested because that's also, I think, maybe his least discussed novel.
Yeah.
So I'd like to hear what you think about it, and if our listeners cue in,
we'll see
what
if
they
we have
think.
any by then.
Yeah. What about you?
Oh, my big thing I'm looking forward to is a little movie from 1995 called Johnny Mnemonic. I feel like nobody out there on the internet has really gotten into it and dissected.
Not really gone into detail?
No. Like, people have glossed over it, maybe spent 90 some hours talking about how I want to get in deep.
Really go deep on it? Yeah, I can get that.
Actually, no. For real, though, my basic bitch-ass answer was actually mentioned to us by our friend Mike the Sailing Guy. But I'm really excited to watch Akira again because I haven't watched it since I was a very young person.
Oh, yeah. I don't think I've seen Akira since, like, DVD. I'm sure I haven't seen that since VHS, man.
Yeah, it's been very long, and I actually started to watch it not long ago. I watched, like, the opening scene and was actually getting hyped, but I don't think my wife was into it at the time, so we watched something else.
Yeah.
I didn't want to be that guy rewatching something she didn't want to see at the moment.
Similar to that, Ghost in the Shell. I haven't seen that since fucking VHS, and John wore that T-shirt.
I've actually never seen Ghost in the Shell.
I remember it absolutely fucking ripping, but
I've seen clips of it and everything, but I've never actually sat down and watched the whole movie. So I'm excited for that too. But Akira, man, that movie just was a powerful thing at the time. I remember it being
and the
good.
imagery. I mean, the imagery in that movie is everywhere.
Right, it is. So, yeah, all those there's something about those old 80s animes that really speak to me. It really triggers a nostalgia bone, so I'm stoked to go back for those. I did also have I don't know if it counts. I feel like it counts. You loaned me a book when we were young folks called Head Crash. Was that what it was called?
Yep.
Is that Cyberpunk?
Exactly right.
I feel like it was.
It definitely is, and it's also similar to Snow Crash in that it's borderline a parody of the genre.
For a long time, I got the two of them confused. Do you remember who wrote it?
Bruce Bethke.
Bruce Bethke, that's his name. I liked that book when you loaned it to me. I think I read it twice, actually.
Yeah, it's a fun book. I haven't read it in, 20 years, I'm sure, but I remember it being very fun. Fun trivia bit about Bruce Bethke is that he is the guy who actually first invented the word cyberpunk.
Really?
Yeah, in a short story.
Oh,
in like 1980 or something.
Well, we got to cover it then. It's culturally relevant.
It is, yeah. That is one of the books that's one of the things that is absolutely on my list, which at some point we should start codifying.
Yes, that is something we need to actually put down because we want to have, if we haven't mentioned this yet, we definitely have to each other, but we want to have a list that people can look at and be like, okay, here's what they're covering if I want to get a jump on this and read some of these books or watch some of these movies so that I can, be in the same place as them as we're listening.
Yeah.
We'd like to do that.
Yes, absolutely.
So should we announce what our next thing's going to be right now or wait and do it at the end?
Yeah, let's do it. I mean,
okay. Drum roll, please. Our next project is going to be another film from 1995, not Johnny Mnemonic, called Strange Days. We've spoken about at length.
Strange Days, directed by Catherine Bigelow.
It's just very recently come back available for streaming after being just flat out gone from anything but the used market for like a decade or more.
Yeah, it has been very, very difficult to find, and we kind of thought, okay, let's jump on it while it's hot, because knowing how corporations work, it might disappear at any moment.
I also feel like we summoned it back into existence by creating this podcast, because when we were trying to figure out what our second property was going to be, we said it would be great if we could do Strange Days, but there's no way to watch it. And literally the next day, it became available on HBO Max.
Yeah, we spoke it into existence, so that was pretty fun.
It was cool. We have great magical powers, and we will use them responsibly.
We'll do our best. Stars Ralph Fiennes, Juliette Lewis, Tom Sizemore, and Angela Bassett. It's a really cool movie that I haven't seen for a long time, but I suspect, based on my memories, that it will have a shitload of relevance to our current culture.
Yeah, I've actually read some recent reviews that say that it wasn't as relevant as they'd hoped, but I don't know, that person, you never know when you're reading Reddit people.
Oh, yeah.
I remember watching that movie in New Year's of 1998, but not on 1999. We missed it by a year.
I think 99 we were busy.
Yeah, we were doing other things.
I think we had some other stuff going on. Some teenage girls were shitting in your toilet. I don't remember how that story went, but
it's a weird night. Maybe we'll talk about it when we're actually doing that movie.
I'm betting that we will. Also, as to set up kind of how the rest of the podcast is going to go, what we're going to do is record a commentary track as we're watching it. This will be a cool Patreon special feature.
Yeah, if it works out, we haven't done it yet, but we're hoping to do it soon, because I'd like to release the Patreon special feature pretty soon after the podcast launches, so I don't know when we're going to actually do this, but yeah, so we should have like an old Creek of the Week style Schitt's Creek thing of Strange Days up on our Patreon.
Then we'll do a separate episode that we'll record after we watch it, about kind of just running through it real quick, run through the plot real quick, and our having watched it thoughts.
Yeah, we'll try to cover the usual stuff. Hopefully the stuff we're about to cover with Neuromancer if things go well.
Egg Sharkly.
Egg Sharkly. So look forward to that, I guess, next week. And I don't know, maybe the Patreon thing is up already.
Yeah, hopefully that's working.
We're a week and a half ahead of schedule right now, so we will see. I hope you like it if it is up. I hope we don't sound like jackasses.
I mean, we probably will, because that's just how we do it.
It's kind of our thing.
I had one more thought about kind of the podcast in general, and
Jesus.
A question I thought I'd ask.
Okay.
Okay, so there were a lot of like cyberpunk, or at least cyberpunk flavored video games.
True.
How are we gonna cover video games on a podcast? I don't think any podcast has ever covered video games before.
There's definitely no video game podcasts. Not a 1.
So what are we thinking as far as that goes?
I have no fucking idea. I don't know how we're going to cover the few music fucking episodes either, but we could do it in a block, like just talk about Cyberpunk video games and try to cover a bunch of them, or we could get the games and play them and see what's up.
That'd be fun. We could have a party like when we were,
like a LAN party.
12 years old, and like I just sit there and watch you play Shadowrun for the SNES on an emulator. Be like, no, dude, go over there.
You might actually dig the 3 new Shadowrun Returns games they made. They're good. Like their storylines are good. Their storylines are good enough that we could cover them on here, and wouldn't be lame. And
also, how will we cover role playing games? Actually, that will be helped by we have a guest lined up for Shadowrun.
Yeah, we'll figure something out, I'm sure.
Yeah.
When we can talk about it more before we actually sit down to record, or not. We just fucking jump in like we're doing now.
Just throw it at the wall and see what sticks.
I know there's no shortage of people out there talking about role-playing games and video games, even though. So maybe we'll just rip off somebody else if nothing else. If all else fails.
Honestly, it seems like a good idea.
All right. Should we dive into part 2 of Neuromancer now that we've burned 25 minutes already?
I think we're actually closer to having burned like 20 minutes because we jabbered before we started, but yeah.
Oh, yeah, true. Well, all right. I feel like we need a bumper between when we switch from
Yeah, that's a good idea. Should we take an ad break? Are we going to get ads on this show?
I highly doubt it, but if we do, I would totally be open to like trailer swaps with other shows and stuff like that. That'd be fun.
Beard oil for your balls or
I'm beeping
something.
That. I'm leaving the beard oil for your balls and letting you guess which company it is, but I'm bleeping
I'm guessing anybody who listens to the podcast will know.
Probably. I'm still writing the time down. Beard oil for your balls. If that was... Actually, I've seen some more news ads. They do pretty much just very specifically get into ball talk.
That is true, yes.
Anyway, let's take a break and come back and hop into this shit right here.
Sounds good.
All right, and we are back. I hope you enjoyed that commercial message. That was probably 0.5 seconds of dead air.
Probably, but hey, you never know. We could get ads.
Yeah. Well, okay, so we're going to talk about Neuromancer, everything besides the plot, because I think we covered the plot pretty fully last episode, the plot and characters anyway.
I think we went relatively in-depth. How do you want to start? Do you have any questions, or would you like to chat about the setting?
Well, what I would actually like to do, if it's okay with you, I feel like if we're going to talk in-depth about Neuromancer, we should talk a little bit about its author, Mr. William Ford Gibson.
Oh, that makes sense.
Since he's probably going to be coming up more than once on this podcast.
I don't know. I mean, this is really his only notable thing. He's had no other influence on the culture.
Kind of a flash in the pan situation.
Yeah.
Well, I did a little minor homework on his bio, mainly looking at Wikipedia, although to be fair, I did try to click through and look at the sources on Wikipedia and make sure they weren't bullshit, so hopefully this is accurate.
Yeah.
See, the man was born in March 17th, 1948, Conway, South Carolina.
Mm-hmm.
We're very familiar with South Carolina.
We are.
Let's see. His father worked construction, so he moved around a lot as a child, and his father actually ended up passing away when he was a kid from choking while he was gone on a business trip.
Yeah, okay. I remembered, one of the things about the sort of mythology of William Gibson, or one of the common points in his biography, is his dad died when he was young. I did not remember that it was choking until you said that. Yeah.
Yeah, apparently, this is according to Wikipedia, his his mother was so distraught, she was unable to break the news to him, so she had to like find some stranger to tell him that his dad had died from choking while he was out of the house.
Yeah.
His mother also passed away when he was young as well. He was 18 and still in high school when she died. I didn't write down what the cause was.
Yeah, that's not something that I can think of off the top of my head if I ever knew it.
Anyway, while he was kind of in that school phase, from what I was reading, he was not super into the small town life, the kind of closed-minded, religious, sports-oriented world. I know you and I cannot identify with that at all.
Nope, go team. We love it.
Also very religious here at the High Tech Low Life podcast.
Go Jesus. We love it.
We pray before every recording.
We absolutely do.
Yes. To which God, you'll have to figure that out on your own as we go.
One thing that I just remembered, to step back a moment, one of the things that William Gibson's father apparently worked on was the Oak Ridge Laboratory, where they refined the uranium for the atomic bombs.
God damn.
Yeah.
See, I knew this would work. If I just wrote down basic facts, it would stir things in your, like, more interesting facts in your memory. So far.
Yeah.
This is working as a podcast concept.
Let's see. Did you come up with anything about the military academy that he went to?
I actually didn't write that down. I did read that it happened, yeah, and that he was actually kind of, well, they called it a boarding school in Wikipedia, but he was actually happy to go there because he hated regular school.
Yeah.
But I didn't get any details about it.
I don't remember anything specific other than it was in like Arizona or something, like the desert Southwest, which he thought it was, like, partially I think he liked the environmental change from
right.
The Great Dismal Swamp and, Appalachia.
Yeah. I'm guessing that would be a change. I did write down that while he was kind of bored in school, he read a lot, particularly favoring beat authors and particularly William Burroughs.
Yep.
Which, once that was pointed out to me, I was like, oh, yeah, I can see that. Makes sense.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it really does. If you have some familiarity with Burroughs, then this, Gibson's writing style makes a lot of sense, and you can also move from Gibson to Burroughs with a little less success at translating, but...
Is Naked Lunch Cyberpunk? Should we cover it?
I mean, you could maybe make an argument that it's kind of proto-cyberpunk. I don't know if I would. But...
Maybe save it for the Patreon.
Yeah.
Anyway, so when Bill's mother passed, he just dropped out of high school and started wandering around, as you could do back then.
Walk the earth like Cain in Kung Fu.
Hitchhiking, spent some time in Europe, and then ended up in Canada to avoid the Vietnam War draft.
Yes.
The quote that he gave was, avoiding the draft wasn't so much politically motivated as it was the result of his desire to continue sleeping with hippie chicks.
Yep. That's one of the things I like about Gibson, that sounds really honest.
Yeah. According to this Salon.com article, his other goals around this time included, quote, sampling every narcotic substance known to man.
Yeah. Yeah, he did a lot of the drogas.
Hence his... I'm sure that has nothing to do with his love of Burroughs.
Yeah, probably not. Did you happen to run across the footage of him in, like, 1970?
No. Although it's ringing a bell, I might have passed it for some reason.
On YouTube, I'm sure, and I haven't looked this up, there is footage of him from some news report, maybe, of, I think it was in Vancouver, maybe Toronto.
Yeah, it was something, yeah, I did see that. Or maybe I read it. I don't know, but yeah, it was something.
Yeah.
What was it about?
I think
it was
just
unrelated to writing or anything like that. It was just
Yeah.
It was just like a man on the street interview.
Yeah, it's weird.
I wish I'd watched now. If this was our old setup, we could just watch it right now. But we can't do that.
No, we can't.
Because we're sacrificing those conveniences for audio quality.
We are. We're trying to make this a better show for you guys.
And a more difficult one for us.
It certainly is.
Anyway, that salon.com article where I got those quotes is pretty good. You might want to check it out. It's from February 7th, 2001. It was promoting a documentary about his life called No Maps for These Territories, which
it's
to watch someday.
It is a pretty good doc. I mean, yeah, I don't know. It's if you're looking to learn more about William Gibson and what he thinks about now, it's a good
now
one.
Being 2001 when it was made.
Yeah,
Now-ish.
Yeah, and honestly, we're in a long now.
We're in a long now. That's a good name for this podcast. Let's change it. Let me just blast through the rest of this. He married Deborah Jean Thompson in 1972, lived off her teaching salary for a while before he went to college. Let's see here. University of British Columbia, eventually getting a bachelor's degree in 1977. Mm-hmm. 1 year before the birth of me. It said that in the article. I couldn't believe it.
Okay.
He credits English lit courses with exposing him to new ideas in writing that he wouldn't have experienced otherwise. And he was also encouraged to write his first short story called Fragments of a Hologram Rose.
Yes, included in Burning Chrome.
Speaking of Burning Chrome, I'm pretty sure he wrote that not long after. Because after he graduated college, he spent a few more years doing odd jobs and then basically the Wikipedia article made him out to be like the godfathers of cyberpunk at some sci-fi conventions. John Shirley, Bruce Sterling, and Louis Shiner. Mm-hmm. And the four of them, basically, they were into Burning Chrome, which he was, I guess, making some waves with. And four of them spent some time together and kind of birthed the genre. Yeah,
we are definitely going to see more of those guys in the future.
I would imagine that's why I took the time to write their names down.
Yeah, I have some opinions that I'll save for future.
Can I get like just an overview? Like, are they good opinions, or like I love these guys, or they're like fuck these guys? Or, I don't know if I can wait.
I don't know. It's not even that interesting. It's Bruce Sterling is one of the absolute most famous cyberpunk guys. Like he ended up editing a volume of short stories called Mirror Shades, which is one of the sort of foundational texts.
Yep, I saw that when I was doing this research.
Bruce Sterling is not a good writer at all.
He's definitely not going to be a guest on our show now.
Probably not. I mean, he would definitely do it because he's also a media whore.
Then I'm editing out where you said he's not a good writer.
Okay, sounds good. Okay, sounds fine. I can talk to him. He's written some okay nonfiction, but boy, he exhausts me.
Okay.
Yeah.
You said you were going to save it, and I asked for it, so there it is. There was something else I was going to say, but I forgot about it, so never mind.
Okay, maybe in this section of the biography, you're going to get into how it was possible for people to earn a living doing short fiction. I mean, not a great living, but some kind of living doing short fiction at the time.
I wasn't going to get into that, but that is kind of implied throughout the biography that Gibson is, if not making a living, making some money and enough to like be doing various sci-fi conventions, because him meeting these dudes takes place over several sci-fi conventions, so he's obviously going to them. Mm-hmm. And yeah, that's interesting. I don't know how interesting.
Well, it's really important. It's a really important factor in the development of science fiction, just in general, and cyberpunk also specifically. that at one point there were a bunch of different markets, magazines and stuff, where, you wouldn't make a lot of money, but you could sell them a story and do okay.
Yeah, I wish that still existed. I mean, now you can self-publish on the internet or through Amazon self-publishing, but it would be nice to have that monetary incitement or whatever for more people to write. I don't know what I'm talking about.
Yeah, then it was a matter of, okay, if you were reasonably promising, you could get a slot in some sort, one of the Asimov books, like Amazing Stories or whatever. And then you'd get exposed, a bunch of people would be exposed to your writing. And then later, Omni and also like Playboy, stuff like that, published a lot of short fiction. So it was possible to just, you wouldn't make a good living, but you'd at least be able to scrape by writing short stories and developing yourself as a novelist rather than...
Or make a few extra bucks to supplement your day job at Sterling Cooper, Draper, Price.
Yes, exactly.
You might recall that was a B plot in one episode of that show.
What was that character's name?
Ken
I can't
Cosgrove.
remember. Ken Cosgrove. I loved Ken Cosgrove.
He is one of the best. He has one of the best arcs on that show. In fact, at one point I was thinking about suggesting a podcast idea where we follow character arcs in shows and movies that aren't like the main character. Because I was just thinking about Ken Cosgrove in Mad Men, because he's there almost the whole series.
Yeah.
But he's just in the background. I don't know. His life falls apart at one point.
He wears an eye patch.
Yeah, he loses his eye. And then he like rises above and gets to the point where they're trying to. Oh, it's interesting.
Yeah.
And there are lots of characters like that in shows that are kind of overlooked, but also awesome.
Yeah.
Anyway. Where the fuck was it? Oh, that was pretty much my end of my bio on Gibson, because that brings us up to about the time Neuromancer came out. Because Neuromancer was never intended to be a great literary work. It was just supposed to be a paycheck for him. I'm trying to remember from the forward. It's been a while now, but he was talking about he was just trying to make a paperback he could make a few bucks on.
Yeah, I mean, it was a paperback original. Which I don't know how much meaning it has anymore, but paperback originals back in the 80s and 90s were lower class. If the publisher seems like it or thinks it's going to be a bestseller or, any kind of real seller, they'll publish it in hardcover. But, paperback, you throw them out. And
did they publish Neuromancer in hardcover? Did they see its potential? Because it goes from...
No, it was a paperback original. Yeah.
So how does a book go from being a paperback original to winning the Triple Crown of science fiction awards? Like you mentioned last episode, the Hugo, the Tony, the Emmy, the Grammy.
Yes.
And Oscar.
Togio.
The Togio.
The Hugo, the Nebula, and the Philip K. Dick.
Yeah, that doesn't make nearly as good of an acronym as EGOT.
How does one go about doing that? Being really good. I'm
just trying to remember the concept of going viral before the internet existed, and it's so far now. Not that this book went viral necessarily, but it gained a cult following rather quickly. Maybe it was probably pushed on by the release of Blade Runner movie, which came out as he was finishing up Neuromancer, from what I've been able to glean.
Yes.
And he was worried that it was going to ruin Neuromancer because everybody was going to think he was ripping it off.
Yes, that's a classic story of him sitting in the theater and almost in tears because this movie has somehow beaten him to the punch.
Which I get the aesthetic, but I don't know. There's a lot of similarities, I suppose, but I think that's just the way people's minds were working at the time.
Yeah. Okay, so how did this book go viral? That again goes in part back to the fact that people could make a living doing short fiction. So Gibson by this point had already published, I don't know how many, probably a dozen short stories between like the real science fiction, literature genre magazines like Amazing Stories and Asimov's Tales, whatever, and also stuff like Omni. So that built a certain amount of audience in. Like, you can stick for almost no money at that point. You could stick an ad in the back and say, the new novel from William Gibson, blah, blah, blah. Or stick the first chapter in as a short story.
Oh, okay, yeah.
So that builds you some market right there. Second, going to those science fiction conventions, kind of, you're more likely to get somebody who you've met and had a few beers at the bar with to read your next story and maybe review it in the backs of those magazines.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So it was a networking thing. It was a word of mouth thing, obviously, and an advertising thing.
Yeah. Also, one thing about the Hugos, which is the World Science Fiction, I can't remember what it stands for. Anyway, the Hugos are, the way the Hugos work is you get nominated for an award, and there's kind of a long list of nominations. Then, if you're a member, they send out copies of those books to all voting members.
Okay.
So, if you get a nomination, and these days it's not as much of a thing because they do digital distribution. I was a member for a long time ago. And it was fucking great because I would just get basically boxes of books.
Really?
For free. Yeah.
Explains how you filled up that library.
Yeah. It didn't hurt. So, yeah, that's how kind of it built to some extent. Also, there's the fact that Neuromancer, William Gibson is arguably one of the best living modern authors. I mean, even if this was intended to be a cheap paperback original, just, plot, whatever, sell some books, make a few bucks, he can't help himself but write good.
Okay. Unlike how you speak.
Yeah. Does that make sense? Like,
it does. I mean, I don't know how books, like, how did the Twilight series blow up? It was mainly internet based, right? I don't know how it works today, but I don't know. It was another time. I think maybe if some of our listeners aren't aged, weary, ancient, and decrepit millennials or young, spry Gen Xers like us, whatever we are.
That's us. Whew.
Baby Gen Xers. Then
I'm
they
so
might
tired.
understand. I know. Anyway, Neuromancer did blow up. That's the point.
Yeah.
Most people, a lot of people commented that it was the future of sci-fi.
Yes. Yeah, and in part because, I mean, just it's one of those things. Gibson writes really well, even if it's intended to be just a pulp, action novel, basically.
Yeah, some people can't shut it off for, to slum it.
Yeah, and that's the case. I mean,
like we could be doing top level podcasting this whole time, but when we were doing Johnny Mnemonic or Johnny in a Minute and Creek of the Week, we were like, let's not lead with our strongest punch. Come on, guys. We don't want to.
Come on. We got to do just some jabs.
Yeah. Yeah. Anyway, fuck.
We're bad at this.
Yeah. Okay, that long pause.
Let's make a point of leaving that in there.
I'll try. So Neuromancer blows up. Everybody loves it. I don't think Blade Runner heard it at all. Blade Runner probably, in fact, helped it because Blade Runner
Blade Runner was a huge failure, so it didn't hurt or help anything.
Did really? I know it was a failure, but surely I always assumed when a movie like Blade Runner is a failure, like Blade Runner 2049 was a failure, but I like fucking fell in love with it when I watched it. So I had to assume a lot of people watched it, people who would be prone to go out and buy books anyway, might be hyped for a book that goes a little deeper, more in depth of the subject that just tickled their brain like that.
Okay, I can see your argument. But a lot of people is not that many, I think, would be.
Not as many as Neuromancer sold, for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense. I don't know. Yeah, and then I guess Cyberpunk had hit the mainstream at that point.
Yeah, and also because it won, those awards and got favorable reviews in sci-fi magazines, once a certain amount of momentum builds for something like that, it's capable to some extent at breaking out of the genre. So, like, serious literary magazines would review it.
Okay.
And, you get a review in The Atlantic, and that sells some books. Or, the New York Times Magazine or whatever.
Interesting.
Yeah, I mean, it
was
wasn't...
a different time, for sure.
Yeah, it wasn't one of those huge, crazy successes like, say, Twilight was, where... it's the best-selling thing in the world next to the fucking Bible or whatever.
Yeah, or Harry Potter or one of...
Yeah, but it definitely moved out of its genre to some extent.
Yeah, and it definitely was king of its genre.
Yeah.
At the time.
It was... I don't know, it wasn't the first thing that you would describe as a cyberpunk novel. It was maybe the first thing that was... consciously a cyberpunk novel, the first thing that sold a few copies and was intended as, okay, this is what we've been working at, as opposed to just some weird one-off that Samuel Delaney wrote in 1972 or whatever.
Yes, good reference.
Okay, sorry. It's a book called Nova.
Okay.
All right.
Nova heads out there are freaking out that you mentioned their favorite book.
Probably. We'll have to get to that eventually.
So let's end the history lesson here, because Neuromancer's out. We know who William Gibson is and his basic motivations for becoming a writer. So what changed after Neuromancer? There's no arguing that it was very influential on definitely on the genre, also on cyberpunk in general. The notes I took, just the terms that were coined in it are pretty interesting. Terms that are pretty commonplace today, like cyberspace.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Yeah. This is the book where cyberspace comes from.
I think the Matrix was first conceived as a term in that book, which is interesting.
That's actually not quite true.
You're telling me that Wikipedia lied to me?
Yeah.
Actually, I don't think that one was a Wikipedia one. I think that was a different article. But
okay, the Matrix actually goes back to Matrix as a simulated reality.
Right. Obviously, the word Matrix appeared before that.
Goes back to the novelization of a Doctor Who story in, I think it was The Deadly Assassin, if I remember right.
Wow.
Which is like 1974 or 2, with Tom Baker as the Doctor. And I don't even remember who wrote that, but there is a character who is trapped in, the Doctor, is trapped in a simulation of reality, and it's described as a matrix.
I guess
now,
that makes sense.
Whether or not that actually, whether or not William Gibson had read that or met anybody who read that and used that word, was directly influenced by that, I don't know. I mean, it's not an unreasonable thing to come up with, but
no, it's not. But hey, if Doctor Who guy did it first, we got to give credit where it's due.
Yeah, it's a weird little interesting fact, if nothing else.
One thing we can say, I think for sure, at least from my reading, is that the Wachowskis did take the term from Gibson.
Oh, yeah, almost certainly. Almost certainly. Wait, yeah. What's that? What's it called?
The Matrix.
Never heard of it.
Oh.
Well, is that something we should cover?
You're on the right show then. That's probably one we're going to save till deep in our run when we're running out of stuff. We're like, okay, we got to bust out the big ones.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good, maybe we got to space the big ones out.
Yeah. We're going to be prepared for some crap in between them.
I mean, not necessarily crap, but, things maybe you hadn't considered before.
No, exactly. That's the fun part. It can't all be bangers. We'd get bored of the bangers. Like Strange Days, I think, is an exciting one because it's a very good movie that I loved very much when I first saw it. And it's not on the level of Matrix or Neuromancer or Akira or whatever. Anyway, let's see here. I wanted to read a quote.
Oh, boy.
Why did I write this down, though? I think this is just describing cyberspace. So, and on Neuromancer predicting the internet, kind of.
Let me guess. Is it a consensual hallucination?
It is. Experienced daily by billions of legitimate operators in every nation, by children being taught mathematical concepts. A graphic representation of data extracted from banks of every computer in the human system. Unthinkable complexity, lines of light ranged in the non-space of the mind, clusters of... I should not be an audiobook reader. Clusters and constellations of data, like city lights receding. I don't know why I wrote that down. I guess I thought it was cool when I was researching, but it sounds... I mean, like a visual representation of the internet.
Yeah. It's a really good one, and it also... That's one of the sections where, and this occurs at least, God, I can't remember if that's Count Zero or Mona Lisa Overdrive, but a very similar rundown occurs in one of the other two Sprawl books. Because fun concept at this point in our lives, William Gibson felt that he needed to explain what the idea of the internet was and how it might look like. So this is a really good way of describing it. I mean, and partially a predictive way of describing it.
Yeah, I also saw here that he was not inspired to create cyberspace from personal computers at the time. He was inspired by video game arcades. Mm-hmm. And once again, another quote. This is from Conversations with William Gibson. He says, I was looking into one of the video arcades. I could see the physical intensity of their postures, how rapt the kids inside were. These kids clearly believed in the space games projected. So that's cool.
Yeah, that's I don't recall having read that before.
Yes, I win.
Nice.
I brought Josh new knowledge. I am the teacher.
Oh, shit.
You are the Vader to my Obi-Wan. Anyway, fuck it. No.
Wait, so you're the bride and I'm Pai Mei?
Sure. I read something on... I don't remember if it was Reddit when I was doing this research or it was just a random message board, but a guy explaining when Case gets back online for the first time after having been burned, and the description of his, what's a word for great joy is?
Orgasm.
No, it's something like that, but his, just...
Ecstasy?
Ecstasy, maybe. I don't know. Yeah, sure.
Shit makes your spinal fluid run backwards. Go ahead.
His extreme joy at being online again, and this guy's description of it was, I remember as a 15, 14-year-old kid addicted to the internet.
Yeah.
That feeling is so fucking real, man.
Yeah.
Like I would go in the summers to my dad's house, and my dad had a computer and the internet. It was, once again, my dad had nothing to do with it. I went out and bought a modem, put it in the computer, called the ISP, got it set up. But it was my dad's computer, and my mom didn't have a computer, and I would eventually purchase one for myself. But for like a year there, I only had it when I would go to visit my dad, and the time in between was
torture.
It was pretty It was like an addiction, man.
Yeah,
there were withdrawals.
Yeah, I remember when the local BBS that I was a regular on went down for like a fucking month or something.
Oh, yeah.
And it was like, oh, fuck. I dial in, hear the awful noises, and it'd just be, bant, just a dead tone and nothing that I could see. Like, there was no, yeah.
That connectivity to the world and a world that prior to that had never existed is like a powerful feeling. I don't know how else to explain it, because all I was doing was talking with other strangers, right? Or playing text-based mud.
Yeah.
But it was that connection, I think, was the real thing that was dumping serotonin into my brain, or dopamine or whatever.
Yeah.
And taking that away was it was hard at the time. I don't know. It's hard to explain if you didn't live there. I guess it's like quitting. It's not like quitting smoking though. It's a different type of addiction. It just feels like you're not connected anymore. It's weird.
Now, one of the interesting things that what you've just said brought up, which good job.
God, I love being interesting. Thank you.
Yeah, you're killing it. Is that one thing that we are, like, from our modern standpoint, that that Case is missing out on is, okay, when we get online, we're dealing with people, like, constantly. That's social media, everything is people. A Case almost never there's no dealing with people when he's online.
That's absolutely true, and I hadn't even considered that, but that's true.
Yeah, it's the only people he interacts with online are a fucking ghost.
A ghost, yeah.
And a fucking rogue AI. Like, everything else is just some weird, archive program or, virus. There's no people.
In fact, in order to deal with a person, Molly, he has to have a special unit, basically, to allow him to experience, and she can't communicate. No, wait, it's vice versa. She can communicate with him, but he can't communicate back with her.
Yeah.
That's interesting, and I had not considered that, but Neuromancer's vision of cyberspace is completely devoid of social connection. Wow.
Yep. Yeah.
I'm sure there's been shit written about this, but it's new news to me.
Yeah, I would bet there has. I've honestly never read anything about it, but it's something that occurred to me in one of the 2 recent rereads of the book. Like, oh yeah, there's no fucking people there. Interesting.
It's worth looking into deeper. It's worth looking if we ever were to have a chance to talk to Mr. Gibson. Just ask him, because like the lack of cell phones isn't hard for me to put out of my brain, but now that you mention it, the lack of people in cyberspace is just kind of strange.
Well,
you would think it would be teeming with them.
I really think it's kind of the same thing. Like, it didn't occur to him that, that the people would be the draw.
Right.
I'm sure it is teeming with people, but at least from Case's perspective, those people don't have anything to offer him.
Yeah, and that's probably true, yeah.
Yeah.
Case isn't interested in those people. He's interested in the ghost and the AI.
Yeah.
Fascinating stuff.
Fascinating. So, talking a little bit about, the cyberspace. What about the meat space? What about the world outside?
The world outside, the dystopia.
Yes.
That's presented to us.
That word is, I think, one of the in my mind, one of the more important points of Cyberpunk.
Definitely.
It's tough to... I think it's tough to have Cyberpunk without an inherent dystopic aspect or potential dystopic aspect.
Has any media tried? Like, what story would you tell in that case?
Well, I think...
Life's good. I'm just a dude with mirror shade eyes just going to work.
I mean, honestly, that's not far off of something, a bunch of stuff that picked up the trappings of the genre rather than...
Yes, like, I heard a lot of complaints about the Cyberpunk video game when it first came out that they weren't leaning heavily enough into the social and dystopian aspects of it, where it was just a glossy, shiny chrome and neon cover. Mm-hmm. And that's true, but like the world presented in that game is not a nice world. It's not one you want to live in.
It's not great. No.
I've only played through like the first couple hours of it at this point, but it's definitely a dystopia. Maybe they don't lean as heavily in on teaching lessons as they could have, but I don't know. Does everything have to have a lesson? I don't know.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Asked and answered.
Yeah. Well, what did you think of the specific world of Neuromancer?
I thought it sounds like they ripped off Shadowrun.
Absolutely. The only thing different is that Shadowrun happens to be in Seattle. He just took the Shadowrun concept and blew it out across the world.
It seemed like a logical way to go when you're writing it from the early 80s. What year does Neuromancer supposedly take place in? Do they ever say, or is it just kind of nebulous future? I like that better.
Yeah, absolutely not. There are throughout the books of the Sprawl trilogy, there's some like kind of hints, but they're all a little uneven. I've seen people place it from anywhere from like 2073 is a number that sticks in my head, like the 2070s, through like the end of the 21.
Yeah.
So yeah, he's real non-specific. There are a bunch of things that seem like hints, but aren't quite things that make sense.
I love it being vague. Like all these future properties that put a date on it. You're just dating your own material because the TTRPG Cyberpunk 2020, well, it's come and gone.
It has. It certainly has. One of the big clues when people try to figure that out, like when it occurs, is Ashpool saying that he's over 200 years old.
Right. Yeah, that would mean it would pretty much have to be pretty distant.
I mean, okay, so what, the oldest people alive now?
That's
I don't know,
true. If he was 70 and
in
2020, he could, yeah.
Well, oldest people alive in 1980.
Yeah. Good point.
Yeah. Yeah, so that's a good question. There are some other kind of potential hints in the other books, but nothing specific, which is really smart.
Well, let's break down the geopolitics of the Neuromancer world real quick. So the USA lost a war that Cordo was fighting in.
Yes.
And
what seems to be some sort of brushfire war. Not anything big or sustained, but with relatively big consequences.
Yeah, it did end up basically breaking it up, balkanizing it, if you will, into smaller states.
Yeah.
And Russia, meanwhile, remained whole.
Yes.
Because that was the big conflict at the time. We got to put ourselves back in 1980. Definitely nothing like today. Russia, not a threat. We're best buds.
Yeah. Yeah, it's very cool and normal.
And I remember him saying something about that. Like he couldn't break up Russia for some reason. I can't remember the exact quote. Maybe you know what I'm talking about.
I don't off the top of my head. Oh.
Yeah,
I don't off the top of my head. I mean, I'm guessing it's just simply a matter of he didn't imagine, it seemed like the Cold War was going to stretch on forever.
Yeah. Well,
if we've got superpowers, obviously those superpowers are going to be fighting.
yeah. And then what else? What else is worth mentioning?
Japan was definitely the future.
Yeah. Yeah, that's
And
kind of a hallmark of all that early cyberpunk.
yeah, this is one of the books that made that a thing, that codified.
I don't feel like this book did it, but there are future properties that it gets a little problematic because
Yeah.
it's real easy to otherize Asia like that.
Yeah, and fetishize
Asia. It's not cool. And I didn't, as reading through Neuromancer, it just felt like Japan was a logical choice. There wasn't any much fetishization of it in the book. So,
yeah, I don't think Gibson does that for Japan at all. I mean,
although reading through his history, he was definitely interested in Japanese culture.
Yeah.
So
yeah, he definitely was, and it makes sense given how Japan developed post World War II.
Yeah, for sure.
Kind of a meteoric rise from literally ashes to the coolest technology in the world. I mean,
Indeed. So yeah, Japan's probably the biggest, but really the big players on the scene aren't the nations; they're the corporations.
Yes, which are in this book especially. You've got a background of corporations being the biggest, baddest things in the world, but it hardly enters into it at all, other than SenseNet.
Yeah, Tessier Ashpool.
Yeah, and Tessier Ashpool also has kind of a weird status in that it's not like in the beginning of the book, the corporations are established as being really, really, really powerful. When Case is talking about Zaibatsu coming down to slum it in Night City and, stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
And how people have, company grade school, company life, company funeral, that type of thing. And this pops up a bit more in Count Zero. But the Tessier Ashpools are presented as a categorically different thing, not a corporation, but the sort of family corporation bond conglomerate mutation. I don't know. Where the family, okay, in a corporation, you can kill 20 executive vice presidents, but they can all be replaced they can all be replaced by the next guy down the chain with no real difference in how things go. Right. But the Tessier Ashpools are a very different organization.
Can't argue there.
Which is part of, comes to one of the themes of the book, that the super rich are not human.
Yeah. That's definitely gets obvious as you get deeper into the book.
Yeah, 3Jane and Ashpool are they're less explicable than Wintermute and its motivations.
Yeah, I think we touched on that in our last episode.
Yeah.
Is there anything else about the world you think is worth mentioning? The meat space?
One of the big things. Chiba is we can definitely talk about Chiba. There are two big things that this book did as far as setting. One, Chiba City is the model for nearly every goddamn cyberpunk everything. It kind of goes into, okay, we've got all these scum bums, scamming, hustling, doing drugs in the shadow of the tower, the big corporate towers.
Sure.
It's fucking violence and whatever.
Debauchery.
Yes. One moment. Hopefully I'll remember to take that out. I probably won't.
Don't edit anything when you send it to me. I'll take it out.
Yeah, good idea. And then the sprawl and the concept of the sprawl, the metropolis grown out of control. Because I'm pretty sure in Neuromancer it introduces it as the Boston-Atlanta Metroplex area.
Yes, they do.
So basically the entire eastern seaboard is one giant megalopolis, which I don't know if Gibson took it or if it was just parallel thinking. That also occurs in the Judge Dredd comics, as Mega City 1 is basically the same kind of linear expansion of cities bleeding into one another. But that is another thing that pops up in pretty much every cyberpunk thing, like just, cities the size of states.
There has to be urban sprawl.
Yeah.
Because there has to be cracks for our antiheroes to lose themselves in.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, okay.
Okay, what do you think?
A+.
A+. All right. Good book. Okay, end of the episode. Bye.
We like it. No, I mean, I think it's the standard for what cyberpunk came to mean for me. Like, most of my introduction to cyberpunk is through Shadowrun, and Shadowrun blatantly ripped this book off. So,
yeah,
it's what I'm used to.
Yeah, I don't know. At a certain point, it's kind of difficult to talk about Neuromancer because it kind of is everything. Like, it's,
right.
It's like asking a fish to describe being wet to some extent.
Yeah.
If we're looking at it from a cyberpunk perspective, like, it's easy. It's way easier to ask the question, what isn't cyberpunk about this, than what is cyberpunk about this? Because, like, if somebody asked me what is cyberpunk about Neuromancer, I would just hand them the whole book. It's like, this is somebody on our Twitter feed used the phrase trope codifier, which that's a
Varane is
Varane?
What his name is?
Yeah. Which, that's a perfect way to put it. There's nothing that isn't cyberpunk about this because it, in large part, defined what cyberpunk is, at least from a mainstream perspective.
Absolutely. That's why we're doing it first. Get it out of the way.
Yeah. So, do you think this is cyberpunk, Eric?
On a scale of 1 to 10?
Yeah.
Give it a 5. No, yes, obviously it's 100% cyberpunk, right?
I mean, I can't disagree. It's, like I said, it's everything that the majority of cyberpunk is.
That's actually a fun thing to do with our future properties, rating them on a scale of 1 to 10. How cyberpunk are they? Because we're going to get pretty out there on some of them, I have a feeling.
Oh, I'm sure. Yeah.
We might get into some 2s and 3s, but this is, without a doubt, Neuromancer's a 10.
Yeah. I think that's an important thing to get out there. This is, like, to some extent, we have to judge everything else we look at in terms of Neuromancer. Yeah. Like, I don't know, it's borderline impossible to get more cyberpunk than Neuromancer. Like, it's tough to get any bluer than the color blue. Yeah,
I would be interested if any, to see if we come up with against anything that reaches its level.
I mean,
what are we requiring? I don't know. If we are actually going to rate these things, what would be our requirements? Like, it's got the dystopia aspect, it's got the transhumanism aspect.
Yep.
Those are the two biggies. What?
Computers?
It's got computers.
Yeah.
Technology. Yeah, I mean,
high tech, low life.
It's definitely missing the elves and dragons, but we'll work on that.
Hey, you haven't read Neuromancer or Mona Lisa Overdrive yet.
That's true. Maybe they get to him in the next one. Count Zero.
Just wait. There's a Witchfinder in Mona Lisa Overdrive.
Nice. But yeah, I'm curious to see if any other properties can equal it. Like I'm thinking of the one at the time, which would be Blade Runner, which is pretty darn close. It doesn't have as much of the transhumanism aspects in it, but it does have like, what does it mean to be human, just like Neuromancer does. So I guess
doesn't really have the body modification,
No.
which goes along with and kind of is part of the transhumanism. But
yeah, it's an important part. There's no doubt about it. But I do think something can be cyberpunk without having body modification in it.
Oh yeah, I don't disagree. I mean, that's one potential aspect of cyberpunk. I think cyberpunk is a list of traits that something can or cannot have. I mean, there are several that would be absolute requirements, but
Neuromancer has them all.
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, I can think of a couple other things that would at least equal Neuromancer in terms of is this cyberpunk, but nothing that really beats it.
In this kind of like, I guess, kind of in this vein, one of those things is, what's the word? Economic disparity, I guess, is pretty important.
Yes.
Yeah. I do have one more quote I wrote here that is probably worth reading. This is more on globalization that Gibson predicted.
Mm-hmm.
It's pretty clear he wasn't a huge fan of the idea. He says, I don't think globalization existed as a concept in 1981, but Neuromancer is set in a very nasty globalized society in which there does not seem to be any surviving middle class. There are only millionaires and people on the street. Like in Moscow and some other less fortunate parts of the world. Everyone says I foresaw cyberspace, but I did foresee the world of globalization, which I think is kind of interesting because, I mean, mainly thanks to the internet, but yeah, it came on, like, historically speaking, it came on fast.
I kind of disagree with his definition of globalization. But I can see where he can get there, I guess.
Yeah. I do think the whole millionaires or not even millionaires, like ultra rich and ultra poor being the only two, that's definitely a repeating cyberpunk trope and increasingly real life trope. Yeah,
I mean that's effectively one of the big reasons behind the phrase high-tech, low-life.
Exactly. I mean, it is the phrase high-tech, low-life.
It's low-life. I mean, that's what cyberpunk antagonists generally are.
That leads me to, I guess, kind of the final thing I want to talk about. Besides just predicting the future, like the internet and globalization and stuff, how accurate do you think this dystopia is to what our world is slowly crumbling into? Do you see a Neuromancer in our future outside of the technology and stuff, but as far as the dystopian aspects go?
I mean, outside of the technology and stuff, like, okay, well, he's missing cell phones.
We've been over this. Cell phones are a big problem with Neuromancer.
Big problem. It's not like, I guess the social conditions for Neuromancer borderline already exist. Where, I mean, I don't think we're tremendously far away from people being able to get all the mods that Molly has.
Right.
There are already people like Molly. I mean, just in, like, that job exists, just as Case's job exists.
Freelance hacker for hire?
Yeah, I mean,
I'd like to meet one. Come on the show.
Yeah, hell.
No questions. I'd also like to meet a street samurai.
Yeah. I mean, they don't have that title, but bodyguard, mercenary, we've
I lived with one.
We know some people who are half a step from Molly.
Absolutely. Well, the gentleman I lived with was less than half a step at the time.
Yeah. Yeah, well, I mean, Neuromancer isn't that far away. The biggest, and we're getting closer seemingly every decade. Like, I don't know, we have these insanely rich fucking idiots doing their vanity projects, like, I don't know, trying to get up into space and set up their own habitats where they live as kings.
You got to wonder, after a few generations of this much wealth, they might be bored with getting to space or owning social media and start, having clones of their daughters made so they can have sex with them.
Yep.
It's not out of the realm of possibilities. And this is like, Gibson wasn't even, I mean, there were billionaires doing dumb billionaire shit, I'm sure, back in the 80s, but not like today. And it wasn't as out there like it is today, I feel like.
Yeah.
Like, I'm sure we've still got super secretive billionaires that don't want to be in the public eye, but we've got these lunatics who love showing off their shit, and I don't know, it's fucked up.
Yeah, it certainly is. So we're pretty close. What do you think? Just
yeah, I think we're very close. I don't know if I agree that the tech that like cybernetics and stuff is coming anytime soon. I would love for it to, but
I mean, I don't think it's going to be affordable anytime soon.
No, well, that's true. I definitely think some of the political and social things he predicted are much more likely and much more close. And if that book does take place in like 2150 or whatever, assuming the world isn't a brick of charcoal from global warming, or maybe exacerbated by the effects of global warming, I think a world like that could be very possible.
Oh, yeah, domes. That's something I don't know if we ever mentioned in this episode or the previous one.
Oh, yeah, they're all domed.
Yeah, I mean, not all, but there's a lot of domes in and about the megalopoli.
Yeah, because environmental stuff is
degradation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which...
that doesn't sound real.
Sounds very likely. It's all, unfortunately, in the 80, 90, and 40 years since this book came out, we have gotten closer to Neuromancer's Dystopia, not farther away, and that's really fucking sad.
Yeah, well, it is, it's one of those things like the Torment Nexus.
Yep.
So, overall, how did you feel about this book? Rating of 1 through 5 hand raisers.
Okay, if we're doing ratings, let's rate it on categories and then average those categories out.
Oh, Jesus Christ. Do we have to do math?
We have to do math.
Fuck.
So if we rate it on just plot, how good it is. I mean, look, maybe I'm a basic cyberpunk bitch. I've been on Discord where people said they don't care for William Gibson, they don't care for Neuromancer. I liked it. I'd give it a 10. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
What would you say as far as plot, character, story?
Yeah, that's great.
If I want, we could be one of those like 10 is unachievable, so we'll give it a 9.5. But that just seems like it's
no, fuck that. I don't. No, I've been in courses with professors who are like that, and no, fuck you.
Yeah, why make the number there if it's unachievable?
Yeah, exactly. It's it is kind of the cyberpunk basic bitch, thing, but yeah, it's a 10. And I mean, I'm not saying that there aren't things that I might like even slightly better than it is, but it's like saying, the Lamborghini Miura is a 10 out of 10 for styling. That doesn't mean the Ferrari F250 GTO isn't also a 10 out of 10.
Absolutely. I was thinking of the exact same comparison. It's weird how our brains work.
Okay, it's like how Young Frankenstein is a 10 out of 10 for humor, but at the same time, Blazing Saddles is also a 10 out of 10. They're telling different jokes, and they're different perfect jokes.
Can't argue there. Never seen Blazing Saddles, but I have to assume it's true.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Okay. Then on, I wanted to rate it on influence.
14 out of 10. I don't know.
We can't go over the scale, but it's clearly a 10.
Yeah.
Maybe it's unfair to grade the level of influence of a genre, of a thing that basically started the genre, but come on, you got to start somewhere.
Yeah, I don't know. Doing these kind of ratings are sort of an exercise in futility for this book, just because, like, oh, it's the biggest thing in the world.
Absolutely. But listeners love rating things, so we're going to do it.
They do.
And then, like when Neuromancer puts out another edition and our podcast is huge, they can put Give It 10 out of 10 by High Tech Low Life Podcast. They can put that on the jacket.
Absolutely. Yeah, great. I'd love that.
So plot, influence. I want to do one on the dystopia of Neuromancer. We like to talk dystopia here. So on the dystopia and its comparison to our own. This one's a little trickier.
Oh, and it's in comparison to our own. I mean,
yeah, we're not just rating on it. What's the coolest dystopia? It's like more like the accuracy of the prediction that this cyberpunk piece made. Because basically, most cyberpunk is predicting a future for humanity, right?
Yeah.
I can't give it a 10.
No. This would be.
There are no cell phones. Like we've been over this.
No cell phones.
So, but as far as this actual dystopia part is, I think it's pretty close. So I don't know. I would probably.
My instinct is to go 7 or 8.
Yeah, I was thinking 8, but I don't. It's like it's hard doing the first one because we don't know what else we're going to be up against.
Yeah,
let's do 7.5 to be safe, at least for me.
Sure, sounds good.
Plus, I like adding decimals in because then we can get like infinitesimally
real
detailed.
Scientific. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
What about fashion?
That's a reference to a good podcast. Hard to break fashion on a book, but everything I heard sounded really fucking cool. I guess, yeah, style. That's a good category.
Yeah. I think style-wise, it does very well. I love the airbrushed abs on the Turing police. That's one of my favorite details.
I forgot about that.
Yeah, I don't know why, but that has stuck with me for 30 fucking years.
I mean, like it's set the standard with the chrome eye shields. That's something every cybernetic freak and every RPG I've made has had to have since.
Yeah, fucking chrome eye shields, leather pants. I mean, Molly is the definition of female Street Sam. I mean,
she's unapproachably cool. And the Trodes, I'm not going to give it a 10 because I think there's something out there that can do better.
You're probably not wrong.
It was the first, and it gets all the credit in the world for that, but especially on the level of style, there is a chance to do better than the first.
Well, and I think one thing that's interesting to note about that is that this is maybe the least conscious of style, like clothing and stuff like that, of Gibson's works.
Oh, really?
Like, yeah, at a certain point, like, he's got one entire novel and effectively like half a trilogy that's just about fashion to some extent.
I think I read about that. He got really into. I think I read that he was into fashion for a moment or something.
Yeah. I think it's my favorite or second favorite of his books.
Is it Edoru? Guessing?
No, I do love Edoru. There is a bunch of fashion in that too.
That's about like celebrity culture, right? I was excited when I read about it.
Yeah, Edoru's great. That's see, I have like 4 favorite William Gibson books, and it just depends on my fucking mood in the day.
Sure, I get it. Yeah.
it's definitely less conscious of fashion than some of his other works.
All right. So we want to give it an 8? I'm going to give it an 8. You give it whatever you think.
I don't think 8 is bad, although... No, I'll give it a 9, if only because of the mimetic polycarbon suit. Because the height of fashion is swirling your legs around and arms around and then disappearing. Lupus Yonder Boy.
So fucking true. And also, Riviera's hologram projection. I thought that was the shit. That was cool as fuck. But I'm going to stick with 8. You go with 9. Your score is going to be slightly higher than mine, but those 4, that's a pretty good group of. Now I just have to average them out. Oh God, math.
Yeah, I'm not doing this. You can.
All right. Give me 2 seconds.
9.25.
Probably. By 4 equals 8.87 is mine.
Okay. So mine's probably 9 even.
Probably. I'll do it 10. This is good. Good radio.
Good pod.
9.125.
Ooh, fun. 9 and an 1/8.
I feel bad not giving Neuromancer a perfect 10. But
See,
I honestly don't think anything's going to get a perfect 10 on the average score. It's going to be a really tough one to pull off.
Yeah. And
maybe Blade Runner 2049, but just because I love that movie more than most things in life.
Okay, sure.
Our scores are never going to be the same. We got to keep that in mind too.
That's true.
We might come across something that I loved and you hated, or vice versa. I kind of hope we do, actually.
Yeah, it's very possible.
So
anyway, are we done here?
I think that's it. I think bringing this in at a tight hour and a half.
And just generally, 1 out of 5 scale to just keep it out of the average.
Oh, 1 out of 5 scale. It's getting a 5.
Yeah, 5 out of 5. C+. I mean,
yeah, strong C+.
Yeah.
All right. Well, that's going to do it for our Neuromancer deep dive. I think we did a good job.
I agree. And I think we might, and I'm not going to guarantee this, we might come back in the future to Neuromancer, if, say, after we've released some of this, people have opinions and want to write in or call in.
Oh, absolutely. In fact, maybe there could be like a Q&A episode in our future, or maybe it's a regular thing we do on the Patreon. I don't know. We'll figure it out. Or maybe if somebody has, there's been 2 weeks of Neuromancer talk. If somebody writes, we'll read about it at the front of the next show too.
That's got to be Cyberpunk, right?
That mask is pretty Cyberpunk. Total Recall is. We got to cover Total Recall.
Yeah, we'll cover Total Recall.
That's a large portion of this podcast is just going to be us realizing new things we can cover in the future.
Yeah. So, great. Next week, Strange Days?
Strange Days. Strange Daws.
Watch it on HBO Max or your bootleg DVDs, whatever.
I believe there's legal DVDs out there. You just had to get them early.
Yeah.
And until then, find us on social media. I'm at the Frog with a 0.
I am at Ace_Collins.
And also, if you're interested in our Patreon, which by this point should hopefully actually have the Strange Days watch along with us, it is patreon.com/hightechlowlife.
Hooray!
All right.
That's been our show. Do we have any fun quotes or anything?
What's the last line of Neuromancer?
He never saw her again.
Sure.
Yeah, because case. Oh, that's actually something that I should have brought up during the show. The last line is thrown in because he didn't want to be tempted to write a sequel.
Oh, yeah. We talked about that in the first episode.
Okay,
yeah.
Did we? All right. He never saw Molly again. Bye!
Bye.
Except in Johnny Mnemonic, where she's called Jane. Don't worry about it. Bye for real this time.
This has been the High Tech Low Life podcast. Find us on Twitter at Johnny60seconds. Email us at hightechlowlifepodcast@gmail.com. And find us on Patreon at patreon.com/hightechlowlife. Theme music provided by Nia Lore at nialore.com. Thank you for listening.
excuse me, Robo. Any special message for all the kids watching at home?
Stay out of trouble.